joining us. Denise Baxter, Indigenous, Makwa Dodem, Martin Fausen Donjaba. My name is Denise Baxter, Vice Provost and Indigenous Initiatives here at Lakehead University. Lakehead University respectfully acknowledges that its campuses are located on the traditional lands of Indigenous peoples. Lakehead Thunder Bay, where we are today, is located on the traditional lands of Fort William First Nation and Mkiwaju, signatory to the Robinson Spear Treaty of 1850. Lakehead Aurelia is located on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. Lakehead University acknowledges the history that many nations hold in the areas around its campuses and is committed to a relationship with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples based on the principles of mutual trust, respect, reciprocity, and collaboration in the spirit of reconciliation. We remain committed to social justice and social responsibility and will continue to advance the calls to Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the University's Canada Principles on Indigenous Education. Before we begin, I would just like to share an important notice of video recording. You may notice there's quite a few cameras around today, but participants are reminded that while we are doing this, we also do this to preserve as a record in our archives, and you can find the edited recorded video on the university website. If you do need to use the washrooms, there's washrooms just to the left and to the right today, and there's refreshments located at the back. It's now my pleasure to invite Elder Sheila Decourt from Fort William First Nation to share the opening prayer. Welcome.
Bonjour, Gakanawea. I'm just gonna light the smudge first. Using 2 of the 4 sacred medicines, sage and tobacco. Tobacco was given to us by the Creator to open that communication doorway between the physical world and the spiritual world. It helps guide the direction of what's going to happen today, so things go in a good way. And it's also to honor my bundle and my gifts. I'm just going to smudge out into the 4 directions. Ichimanatu, Nopasak, Nishomasak, Indishnikas, Nibingimiwan, Benezi Wazasu, Nemki Wajun and Doji, Nisquatazin and Dodum. Giga Simoke, Migwich Gamaticos, Migwich and Nemki Waju, Migwich Nani Biju, Anishinaabe Gichigami, Migwich Mamaki Asema, Mashkade Wingwash, Wingwash Kishkandag, Migwich Wabano, Jawano, Nigabi Wanong, Giwejano, Migwich Nungam, Migwich Dagwagwin, Miigwech Nibby, Miigwech Newton, Miigwech Mino Badazwin. Miigwech today, for this day to honor our Indigenous war veterans. We also ask for special prayers for those that are suffering from illnesses or grieving loss of loved ones. Today is a very special day to honor our Indigenous war veterans who never always got the recognition and the honor that they deserved after returning home. It wasn't until 1994 that they finally started getting that recognition. And I'm so happy that they are today. And so I love to see the university doing this special day. When I worked at Indigenous Services Canada, I would do a special ceremony on that day in our department and bring in a couple of war veterans, male and female, and we would have our own little Indigenous ceremony. And I would bring those cenotaphs into the boardroom so our staff could come and participate. And we would honor the Indigenous war veterans from Fort William. And we would have a cedar wreath and everybody would put a poppy down on that cedar wreath. And then on the 11th, when we have Remembrance Day on, you know, in the city of Thunder Bay, there is a few different locations that have Veterans Day, but I would always go up to the mountain in Nimkiwaju, and I would lay that wreath up on that mountain that day to honor the veterans for Fort William First Nation. So it's an honor to be here. And so before I pass it off to everybody, and oh, and in the language, I was just basically giving the land acknowledgements and giving thanks for our way of life and our good life, water and the wind that gives us our life breath, and the water that gives us life. And I introduced myself in the language, and my name is Summer Rain, and I come from the Thunderbird Nest of Thunder Mountain, also known as Mount McKay, in the community of Fort William First Nation, and I'm Turtle Clan. But as I was introduced, I'm also known as Sheila DeCourt. That is my birth name. So it's an honor to be here. So I'm going to share a veteran song today. And I have to have my little note because I got to do the, just in case I forget, because it's not like I sing it every day, right? But with it's a veteran song to honor the Indigenous war veterans. And it's what it translates to is, thank you, soldier. You are a brave warrior. You go with the eagle. Thank you, warrior. I need drink. Make which Nibby. Nibby is life. We need that water. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Make wish na Ganesh. Zunigadeo Gichida. Make a zino witchiwa. Make witcho Gichida. Oh, Gichida. Oh, Gichida. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Make wishes on Ganesh. Zunagadeo Gichida. Make a zino witchiwa. Make witcho Gichida. Oh, Gichida. Oh, Gichida. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Big witch and Ganesh. Zunagadeo Gichida. Make a scene a witchy wa. Make witcho Gichida. Oh, Gichida. Oh, Gichida. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Big witch and Ganesh. Zunagadeo Gichida. Make a scene a witchy wa. Make witcho Gichida. Oh, Gichida. Oh, Gichida. Oh, Gichida. Oh, Miigwech, Miigwech, Miigwech. Miigwech. Oh, Gichida. Miigwech. To the veterans that are here today. Oh, Miigwech.
Miigwech. Elder Sheila for that beautiful song honoring our veterans, those that have, are still with us, but those also who have passed on. It's now my pleasure to introduce the president of Lakehead University, Dr. Jillian Siddell. Welcome.
Bonjour, Wachea, Tanshe, Anin, and welcome. A warm welcome to our invited guests and speakers. I would like to thank Elder Sheila for her opening prayer and for the beautiful song that she just shared with us. Miigwech. We're here today to pay tribute to the contributions and sacrifices made by First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples in service. November 8th, today, is Indigenous Veterans Day, a day where we remember and commemorate the contributions of Indigenous veterans in the First and Second World Wars, the Korean War, as well as various conflicts and peacekeeping missions. We express our deepest gratitude to them and their families for their service and sacrifice. National Aboriginal Veterans Day began in 1994, and since then, more and more communities across Canada recognize this important day. Over 12,000 Indigenous people are estimated to have volunteered in all three wars, and over 2,700 Indigenous people are in active service today. During the First World War, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people were not considered citizens of Canada, and consequently, they were not eligible for conscription in the First World War. Despite this, many volunteered, facing considerable challenges, which included traveling long distances, learning a new language, and coping with racism. Many soldiers returned home only to find that the policies of enfranchisement under the Indian Act resulted in their loss of identity as status Indian. They received no benefits, and many had their reserve land sold to the Soldier Settlement Board, thereby reducing the size of the First Nation community. First Nation, Métis, and Inuit soldiers brought unique skills and attributes to their service in the armed forces, including tracking, as was the case with Private Joseph de Laurent from Nipigon Red Sky Métis Independent Nation, who was awarded a military medal. Thomas Godshare from Long Lake, who was awarded for his scouting skills and bravery. The Belanger brothers, Peter and Augustine from Fort William First Nation, who enlisted in World War I and were awarded military medals for crossing multiple miles to deliver messages. Code talkers like Charles Checker Tompkins of the Métis Nation were fluent in the Cree language and had significant impacts in the wars. Others, like Edith Anderson Montour, a young woman from the Six Nations Grand River Reserve in Ontario, served as a nurse in World War I. Many more served with distinction, winning medals for bravery in action and giving their lives in service. The Native Veterans Association of Northwestern Ontario was founded by the late Charles Willie John. Willie was an Ojibwe of the Red Rock Band located at Lake Helen Reserve near Nipigon, Ontario. He was a veteran of the Second World War. His dream of forming an organization of Indigenous veterans became a reality, and a founding meeting took place on November 11th, 1988. Indigenous veterans and families came from across Northwestern Ontario and participated in a Remembrance Day service on Mount McKay. You'll see images from that original ceremony in the Indigenous Veterans of Treaty 3 exhibit we have been honored to host for the past 2 years. This year, we are excited to announce, in partnership with the Native Veterans Association of Northwestern Ontario, Treaty 3 Indigenous Veteran Exhibit, Thunder Bay Museum, and the City of Thunder Bay, a new chapter for Willie's vision, as these partners will work together to create a permanent and portable exhibit in the coming year that will be shared throughout the region to commemorate the important contributions of Indigenous veterans. We would like to acknowledge the entire team that brought the original project together. Beverly Alto, Greg Kutchigan, sorry Greg if I mispronounced that, Owen Zicole, Stan Alto, Brian Walmark, and David Michael Thompson, who is the research developer and project manager and who is joining us today. We are honored to be able to bring this year's exhibit to our campus and welcome folks from the community, as well as our students, faculty, and staff to experience. Miigwech, Marcy, thank you.
Thank you very much, President Siddell. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Jan Ritchie. Jan had the honor of serving in the Battle of Fallujah in 2004 as a United States Marine Corps veteran. And I understand that Jan served also 2 tours during that war. And Jan currently serves our community through the Thunder Bay Police Association. And I also see him often giving himself at community gatherings and powwows. So really, really deeply appreciative to have you here with us today. Welcome, Jan.
Bonjour. Sasa Akin, Makwa Zit Disnakas, Sagin Donjaba, Wikudam in Indayang. Gichi Migwech Wandam, Mampi, Shimagamish Gagishak, Chimigwech, Mawakwe, give me this Sama. So, good morning. I'm happy to be here. I'm from Sagin First Nations and I reside here in Thunder Bay. And my spirit name is, it's a warrior's name that was passed on to me through a ceremony back in 2004. And that name that I carry, it holds dear to my heart. And because I believe that that name kind of helped me to come home to continue to work to be a servant for the people, for Anishinaabe people. So I just thought I'd share that. So I am deeply honored and grateful to be here today among friends, colleagues, and fellow veterans to commemorate and honor Indigenous Veterans Day. I am a proud Anishinaabe man who had the honor of serving the Battle of Fallujah 2004. As a United States Marine Corps veteran, I stand here with humble pride and reflected my service to our country. My journey from the Marines to academia and now residing in this beautiful territory of Fort William First Nation and working in Thunder Bay community, it has really been a very profound and humbling experience. The values of teachings of Anishinaabe combined with discipline and honor instilled in me during my first service have shaped my path in ways that I could have never anticipated. As we gather here today, it's crucial to recognize the contribution, sacrifices, and resilience of Indigenous veterans throughout our history. The stories and experience of Indigenous service members, their courage and their dedication too often remain unacknowledged and underrepresented. It is our duty to ensure that their stories are told, honored, and never forgotten. The significance of this day goes beyond mere remembrance. It's about acknowledging the interconnectedness of all veterans, regardless of their background, and unbreakable spirit that unites all of us here today. The values installed in me through my Anishinaabe tradition, 7 grandfather values, resilience, and the deep connections to community have continued to guide me through my educational and professional journey. These principles have influenced my commitment to service not only in the military, but also in the community as well as where I work today. As we pay tribute to Indigenous Veterans Day, let us renew our commitment to supporting all veterans, especially those from Indigenous communities. Let's honor their service by ensuring access to resources, care, opportunities they rightfully deserve, and welcome them into our Anishinaabe culture to set them on a good life of healing. Anishinaabe b'madzawin gichimikana ke dabma. That's how I would say that in my language to honor the veterans. I want to express my deepest gratitude to Lakehead University for providing this platform to honor our Indigenous veterans and for inviting me to share a few words. I continually inspired by the resilience and strengths of our Indigenous veterans, and I'm honored to stand alongside you in commemorating this beautiful day. Summer Findalis, always faithful, Chimiwech. Thank you.
Miigwech, thank you so much for your thoughtful comments, deeply moving and also very deeply appreciative. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce one of the creator project manager of bringing together the thinking, the idea, and the histories and voices of many Indigenous veterans throughout Northwestern Ontario, David Michael Thompson, who for the exhibit that you may have had a chance to look at, but you certainly can have a look at following this part of our ceremony. David worked as the research developer and project manager with a large number of people. And so we'll invite him up to hear a little bit about how this came to be. Welcome.
Bonjour, Kinawea. Wadiske and Indigenous cause. Nabigo Saga Ganing and Don Jaba. Winchadwa Big Zaging Asian Kadeg Ushkona Gunning Migizi and do with them. Hello, everyone. My name is David Thompson. I'm from Lake Nipigon. I'm registered with the Rocky Bay First Nation, and my clan is the Eagle. And I'm a graduate of Lakehead University, and that's where this story starts with the website and all the research. As soon as I graduated with my degree out of here, I walked out that door, and who was waiting for me on the other side? Willie John. And Willie John and Lawrence Martin and his wife, Ruby. Beautiful people I'll ever be grateful for coming into my life. At that time, 1988, they were forming the Native Veterans Association of Northwestern Ontario. Well, they didn't know what it was going to be called at the time, but they went through a variety of different suggestions for names. And so they said, you're coming with us. I said, okay. So they put me on a path and they said, this is what we're doing. This is what we want to happen. This is our vision. And we want you to work for us and put together some of these things we want developed. And one of the things was putting together a collection of pictures that they had already assembled, stories. So they sent me on a mission. So, okay, go out and find these people, see if there's pictures, if there's stories, collect stories. And I did that for several years, which I still continue to do. And so I got to travel with Willie around the region, meeting different people, collecting stories. And I was starting to learn how to use a little bit of technology at the time. I was introduced to a computer. I was like, what's this thing? So I learned how to use a computer, I learned how to use a camera, I learned how to use a tape recorder, and I learned how to use a couple of other different gadgets that some of them were successfully worked and some of them didn't. But thank goodness for cassette tapes and micro recorders. Those came in very, very handy. So I interviewed people across the region, earned their trust, and they provided me with oral stories. And as Anishinaabe people, that is our tradition. We pass everything down through oral stories. I want to share one story. When I was in high school, I think I was in grade 10, it was history. The teacher was talking about the War of 1812, and that sparked my interest. And I was like, wow. I said, I know something about that. I said, and I told the teacher, I was really anxious to put up my hand to say something. And I said to the teacher, I said, I know who Tecumseh is. I said, my Gishkamanasi, I said, served with him. And Gishkamanasi is one of my ancestors. I said, he served with Chingwa Coast from Gitagan ZB, that's Garden River in Sault Ste. Marie. And so I was telling this whole story. And finally she said, well, where did you read this? Where did you read this story from? So I was kind of disappointed at the time because, it wasn't in a storybook, just an oral history passed on to me. And so most of our stories are like that. They're oral history, and it continues to be that way. And within the last few years, where things are starting to be written down. And so this is what Willie wanted me to do. Let's start writing this stuff down. We want to get a book, put it in a book, for kids to learn in school, because it's important to learn the history of Anishinaabe military history, because we get $4 a year since 1850, but in 1812 we were allies of the crown, and we still view ourselves that way. We are the First Nations. We are the distinct people on our lands in a place called Canada, and it's very important to recognize and remember the efforts that our people have put forth in terms of human resources, going out into getting caught up in these battles that maybe we shouldn't have got involved in, because in the end, it caused a lot of damage to us. We never recovered from that. And so when it came time when Canada was becoming a country, it was difficult for us because we didn't have that political power to assert ourselves in the development of the politics, the economy, and we still don't. Right? We still sit off to the sidelines as Her Majesty's faithful allies, and we struggle. We still get $4 a year in 2023. Hopefully that changes. Hopefully that changes, because a lot of resource money has come out of this development of our lands. And hopefully justice is served in the near future to make that better, because we've lived in poverty far too long enough in our own lands. And our veterans, volunteered. Most of them were volunteers, volunteered First World War, Second World War, Korea, right up to the current time. We still have numbers of Anishinaabe people volunteering in very high numbers. And we are only a very small percentage of the total population of Canada. But yet when you compare us to any other group, we have the highest percentage of volunteers enlisted. And those are some of the stories that need to be told. And so Willie Lawrence, got me on this track. And I worked with them very closely for a number of years. And we had so much stuff. We thought, okay, now we can approach, see if we can find some funding for a book. And that was a very tedious task, because we had to learn about these different funding sources and then their conditions. And in the end, it never satisfied the conditions, because we're always fighting over copyright. It's like, well, this stuff belongs to the people, not to the funding source. So we often passed on opportunities for that because of that. This belongs to us, not to anybody else. Just because you're going to give us money to fund something doesn't mean you suddenly own it. This belongs to the people. So finally, Industry Canada had this program back, I think in 1997, 98. And we submitted an application, got approved, and we were able to hire 4 university students from Lakehead University, 2 from Treaty 3, 1 from Treaty 9, and I think the other one was also from Treaty 3. And the names of those university students at the time was Greg Quachigan, Stan Alto, Stan Alto, yeah, Owen Zokel, and Beverly Alto. Hopefully I got those names right now. It's been a long time, because I had to email Greg this morning. I said, what year was that? It seems so long ago. But they did a wonderful job. we sat down, I sat down with them, sat down with the veterans. We have all these pictures, we have all these transcripts. We want them put on a website because websites were starting to become common, especially in the north. And so they went at it and they did a wonderful job. And they got nominated for some kind of a national award for their website. Well, our website, but they were part of it. And so when we sat down and reviewed the final to sign off on it, we said, okay, I think it's ready to go. And it's not perfect, but it was something to start with because you know, the book part wasn't going to happen because of issues we had with other funders. So this one, we had control of it. We had full say. And it's been up since 1998. So now it's now 2023. And it's quite, I mean, it's still relevant, what the material that's in it, but we'd like to take it a step further. So it's been in that state for that number of years. And then recently, Anna, Chief, approached me about this proposal about creating a traveling exhibit, partnering with various people in Thunder Bay. And I think that's really important, is these partnerships and building trust again. It's part of truth and reconciliation. Right? Reconciliating, telling our truth, right? Because our history as veterans is not a pretty one. Just like the previous speaker mentioned, you know, we got shortchanged when our veterans came back. You know, we got shortchanged on land. You know, the land that we were given was already land that belonged to the reserve, so there was no gain. You couldn't go to the bank and get a mortgage and saying, "Hey, I got land here." Well, no, that's reserve land. You can't mortgage reserve land. But they should have got their own land like anybody else. And there were shortchanged on a lot of things, you know, with money. I know grants, startup grants under the Veterans Act loan, you know, they only got half of what everybody else got. So those are some of the sad truths. And when they came back after, you know, serving their country well, some of them didn't come back, and they couldn't get into the legions, right? Because the Indian Act says you cannot serve an Indian alcohol. So, you know, after fighting for our country, our people were told, you know, sorry, we can't serve you. You know? So oftentimes they had to get served out the back door by their comrades, you know, because they felt bad. You know, my chums that I, you know, fought in the front lines with have to get served alcohol in the back door. So 1952, after several years of lobbying the government, our chiefs and our people finally had some relief. So the changes came to the Indian Act in 52 that took out that section. You know, that we couldn't have powwows, we couldn't be served alcohol. But now, because of all those changes, we're starting to get our colors back, our beautiful colors. We're starting to get our strength back. We're on a path of reconciliation and getting, you know, getting access to things everybody else takes for granted, such as, you know, clean water, you know, adequate housing. So these are the things that the veterans advocate for and fought for, is to have freedom in our own land. When they fought overseas, they were welcomed by the European people that they were liberating. But when we came back to our own country, you know, they didn't receive that same gratitude. You know, you came back and you were still that definition of European, Euro-Canadian understanding of an Indian. You're down here, right? And we're not down there. So we have to start educating ourselves in terms of one of our grandfather teachings, humility. We have to start learning and teaching cultural humility. And that's the vision of the veterans group. And it's heartbreaking because I wish they were still here, because now sometimes I feel alone because I'm still the researcher, still collecting stories, still collecting pictures, and still trying to push that vision of Willie and Lawrence. And I will continue to do that as long as, you know, the Creator grants me life in this world. But there's so many other things I'd like to address and talk about. But thank you, Miigwech Kikinawa Bizindawayik. Thank you for listening, for my little part of the story. But it's a bigger story. It's about the Anishinaabe people. It's about the protectors, the Ukichita, the Shamaganish, the warriors, the soldiers, and their story and their wonderful, contribution to this beautiful country. And one last thing I'd like to point out: democracy didn't come from overseas. Democracy was already here before the Europeans arrived. They discovered freedom when they came here, when they saw us, how we lived. They left Europe because there was bad things happening over there. And they saw what we had. We had all this beautiful land, food, cooperation, family, and they wanted that. And we welcomed here. And that's how the treaties process started. Hey, you want to be here? Well, here's the agreement and understanding of how we're supposed to live together. We're going to share, we're going to respect each other, and live together, traveling in our own paths without interrupting each other. But our path has been horribly interrupted. And that's what we're trying to get out of. We're healing from that. Hopefully, when the balance is reestablished, we'll have that, truth and reconciliation. Miigwech.
Just a small gift. So we clearly have a lot more stories to hear, and that's something that you can look forward to as the exhibit continues to grow over the next couple of years. There's another person I'd like to introduce who's part of this story as well in terms of sharing the story, Michael De Jong, who's curator and archivist, and I'd like to welcome Michael to share a little bit about his role. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Michael DeYoung, and I'm the curator and archivist with the Thunder Bay Museum. It's an honor to be here today to contribute in a small way to the commemoration of the contributions of Indigenous veterans. In producing exhibit content, we partnered with the Thunder Bay Military Museum to highlight the stories of 7 Indigenous veterans from Northwestern Ontario in a small temporary exhibit, but which only touch on the many hundreds more to be told. In the future, we'll be adding to this important historical documentation and expanding our exhibit content while recognizing ultimately the stories within don't belong to us. This summer, I had the opportunity to visit Vimy Ridge, and while there, I made a point to visit the grave of Private Thomas Godchair, who's been mentioned earlier today, at the Givenchy Road Canadian Cemetery nearby. Godchair was from Long Lake 58 First Nation and served with the 94th and later 102nd Battalion. On the first day of the Battle of Vimy Ridge, April 9th, 1917, he was killed in action while performing dangerous but critical scouting patrols. The cemetery and surrounding area is now starkly beautiful and tranquil. I remember a small flock of sheep peacefully roaming around underneath the pine trees just behind the cemetery. One can only imagine then the contrast to the shelled, bleak landscape and the terrors that soldiers like Godchair encountered on those fateful few days, well, so long ago, reminding us of the selfless sacrifice so many of them made. Echoing the words in the exhibit, it's important to remember all those who have served in the past, but also to recognize those who still serve today, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in Canada's armed forces. They served bravely, earning numerous decorations, while often facing prejudice from fellow soldiers and Canadian society as a whole. Some have made the ultimate sacrifice and perished in battle. Others served honorably during times of conflict and continued life afterwards, while being affected by the many negative repercussions of military service. It's imperative for all of us to remember and honor their sacrifice. I would like to thank Lakehead's Indigenous Outreach Office for the invitation to play a small role in this commemoration. Thanks again to Captain George Romick, Director of the Thunder Bay Military Museum, for his assistance with our research and exhibit. Also thanks to Anna Chief for working alongside us in this project. And also wanted to recognize David Michael Thompson for the years of hard work that with the team went into the honor roll of Indigenous veterans. Finally, I also wanted to recognize our exhibits curator, Sydney Balouz, for assisting with the creative process for our exhibit panels. Thank you, merci, and miigwech.
Thank you for that. And again, we have more stories to look forward to. I would like to welcome Alain Joseph, friend and colleague, acting manager of Indigenous Relations at the City of Thunder Bay. Welcome.
Bonjour, Annie. Bonjour, bon matin, good morning. My name is Alain Joseph, and I'm originally from the unceded Algonquin territory that is now known as Ottawa. I also carry the name Giwaden Inini, North Wind Man, which I received in ceremony. Indinawe Maganidug, all my relations. We are all related. This is a phrase that I've heard spoken often by Indigenous people, and one that I think about frequently. It holds a lot of meaning. It reminds me of the concept of camaraderie in military and similar circles. Those folks feel a closeness to each other that perhaps would not be understood by others. That they experience something that others have not, war. A shared lived experience unlike anything out there, something unique. An experience that makes them brothers in arms and creates a bond that many would describe as unbreakable. Indinawe Maganidog, all my relations. This phrase also makes me wonder about what motivated and continues to drive people to take up arms, to honor commitments to longstanding allies, to fight for an idea, or perhaps to protect all of those relations that that phrase references, the animals, the plants, the water, and the land. Indinawe Maganidog, all my relations, my brothers in arms, a knowing nod, a familiar stare. I can see that you're here, and I know you've been there. Let me bid you farewell. Every man has to die. When I leave here today, I will look to the sky. I will listen for silence and ask myself why. We are all fools to make war on our brothers in arms. Miigwech, Marcy.
Miigwech, Alain. Thank you very much and appreciate the poetry. I would like to welcome my colleague, Dr. Michelle Bayot, who wears many different hats, I will say, but certainly serves in many roles. And today he's here as the honorary colonel of the Lake Superior Scottish Regiment. But as my colleague, he serves as the associate vice provost academic special projects. So welcome, Michelle.
Thanks, Denise. Hello, bonjour, bonjour. As Denise mentioned, I'm the honorary colonel of the Lake Superior Scottish Regiment. Now, honorary colonels have a very valuable role, but also a very distinct pleasure to be tasked with fostering esprit de corps, serve as ambassadors to the public, and are guardians of regimental traditions and history. Today is one of those days where those traditions and history are incredibly important. For over a century, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people have served with the Canadian Armed Forces. As I already mentioned, over 12,000 served in the First and Second World Wars, the Korean War, the war in Afghanistan, and hundreds of individuals continue to do so proudly today. As part of Veterans Week, today is a day set aside to recognize and acknowledge the many accomplishments, contributions, and sacrifices of Indigenous peoples, not only to Canada's war efforts, but to its peacekeeping reputation. The history found in the exhibit that hopefully you're all going to be looking right after this today is part of that shared history. Knowing this is also part of our shared future. It has been estimated that those who served in the First World War to leave their traditional lands achieved the most honors per capita. They did so as volunteers. The most Canadians are unaware of the fact thousands of Indigenous men and women from across Canada enlisted to and fight in the Second World War. That included status and non-status. Thousands more Métis also participated. The contribution made by various peoples in Northwestern Ontario directly reflects this national contribution. And in fact, as mentioned, it's higher than the national average. This exhibit tells the story of some of those individuals, but there are so many more. What is also important to recognize today is that those peoples who did fight did not have the same rights as others who served. For example, federal law prohibited Indigenous peoples from having the vote, and a result, thousands of Indigenous veterans that had fought to stem the tide of tyranny and dictatorship in many conflicts found themselves without a voice in Canada unless they gave up their status, something that under law was not changed until the 1st of July, 1953. They're also the only group in Canada determined to be ineligible for the Veterans Land Act benefits, something that was offered to everyone else who had served. Now, deciding to give up status rights would affect not only the individuals at the time themselves, but also their descendants. This is another thing that's important for us to be thinking about and remembering today. Compounding the issues were internal conflicts between the government ministries at the end of the Second World War. As a result, most veterans were unaware of or unable to access or outright told they did not exist, even those meager benefits that should have been available to them. To their credit, many fellow soldiers from all of the regiments raised in Northwestern Ontario in the Second World War and in the conflict since have voiced their consternation to commanding officers, city and town officials, members of parliament, members of the provincial legislature. Unfortunately, for many years, this went unacknowledged. Many Indigenous veterans in Northwestern Ontario would take up leadership roles in their communities after the Second World War, after serving in the Korean World War, and other peacekeeping operations in the decades afterwards. They spearheaded social and political movements, not only throughout our region, but throughout the entire country. After decades of petitions, it was not until 2002, and I want you to think about that, 2002, that the federal government offered for the first time a redress package to Indigenous veterans and didn't extend that to Métis and non-status until 2004. This history is part of that shared history. Knowing this is also part of our shared future. Today, approximately 3.5% of the Canadian Armed Forces is of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit descent, representing many distinct cultures across this country. They continue to serve Canada and their nations and their territory at home and abroad. This includes generations of family members serving today in my own unit, the Lake Superior Scottish Regiment. And as an aside, last night, in recognition of one of the anniversaries of the Second World War, one of the presenters was the great-great-grandson of one of the individuals recognized in the First World War for meritorious service. He has cousins, uncles, his younger siblings who are now in the cadets. I mean, so it is a family affair, but it also is a shared history amongst them, both the challenges and as well as the things that they are proud of. Today is also a day that's a reaffirmation of the Canadian Armed Forces reconciliation priorities, which includes engaging with Indigenous communities and learning from them and listening from across Canada through a variety of programs and activities. Recent examples include National Indigenous Youth Leadership programs such as Eagle's Nest, which is an annual program. It was hosted actually at Fort William First Nation in partnership in 2018. The 2022 International Lake Superior Patrol Competition was also hosted by Fort William First Nation. These and other activities, such as the ongoing Junior Canadian Rangers program and the Canadian Rangers program in general, serve as examples that all Canadians should follow. Other initiatives, such as the National Bold Eagle program, are intended to foster and enhance existing bonds between communities and the Canadian Armed Forces. Lastly, today is also about making efforts to better understand, through initiatives such as this exhibit, the role of Indigenous veterans have played, continue to play, and expressing our heartfelt gratitude. Thank you, Merci and Megwich.
Thank you, Michelle. So our final speaker, before we observe a moment of silence, is Brandon Real Amyot, who is joining us from Aurelia and is working or acting today, acting president of Lakehead University Student Union, and is also vice president of LUSU Aurelia. Welcome, Brandon.
Sego, Good morning, everyone. So many important words have already been shared that I'm really trying to sit with what's been said. I think I hope everyone who hasn't already taken the time takes the time to walk through that exhibit. I took a few moments this morning, and what's really been sitting with me as I offer my prayers and reflect on what we're doing today, which is remembering. And part of remembrance is thinking about, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention thinking about the fact that, these wars that we fight in, whether it's previous ones or the wars that exist around the world today, have a real impact on our communities here at home. To go off and fight, to be recognized as an equal on the battlefield and then come home and be treated differently. It's the result of a systemic issue that exists still to this day. And so as part of that truth, we have to acknowledge the truth that the horrors of war are not something to be taken lightly. And the horrors of colonialism, of mistreatment and discrimination here at home are also not to be taken lightly. And so I appreciate, hearing those calls to make sure that people have proper mental health supports, particularly veterans, as well as their families and communities, because they are impacted by those stories too. And it's so important, as a young person being here at a university to see these stories reflected permanently and in a traveling fixture. So I was very glad to hear this morning about that traveling to people to share those stories, because oral histories carry everything. They carry things that a textbook can't necessarily reflect sometimes, those very personal experiences. And the other thing that I reflected on this morning is how, again, bringing it back home, it's not so much always what happened when abroad fighting, but the impacts of what you bring back home. Some positive things, certainly. The stories of camaraderie and the warm welcomes that people received abroad, Indigenous veterans received abroad, but then coming back home and being turned away, by community, but by communities all over the place. And so, I think about this as a young person. I think about what my role is. My role is to listen. And hopefully I'll learn to not repeat those atrocities, but also I'll learn to challenge and to uplift the stories shared there in that exhibit, and that will be traveling around to communities. So just on behalf of the student union, I want to say Nyawe Miigwech to those who have served, to those who have fought for us. And I hope that we learn from the mistakes of the past, and I mean everyone, learn from the mistakes of the past and work better together to make sure that they don't happen again, and that we support each other, whether it's through mental health, through community, through storytelling. Storytelling is very powerful. It weaves together, the broken bonds that we have here on our campus, in our community. And I just want to say again, Miigwech Nyawe, for allowing me to speak. There's so much that's been said already. I don't want to repeat, but I just want to sit and really absorb what's been said, and I'll continue to do so walking through the exhibit.
Miigwech, Brandon. So I'd like to invite everyone to, if you're able to stand, and we're going to have a moment of silence. I'd like to think about what we've heard, what we've experienced, perhaps the people in our communities and in our lives. So we'll just take a moment. Thank you. Please be seated. And I would like to invite Elder Sheila to take us to our closing. Thank you.
I feel we forgot to applaud a couple of people. And I think maybe because people were feeling, I don't know why people didn't want to applaud in the beginning. So we need to applaud Jan for his words. Miigwech for sharing your words. And I just want to, it's important. And I know it wasn't intentional. It was an oversight. People were shy to applaud, I guess. But then I see that as we continued, we started to do some applauding. So I just wanted to bring that back to to acknowledge your service, Jan. Chimigwich to you. So I think I'm just gonna close again by singing the veteran song again because it's what needs to be sung again. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Miigwech Ganesh, Zunagadeo Kichida. Megazina Wichiwa, Miigwech Gichida, Gichida, Gichida. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Big wish and all goodness. Sooner good day you get cheated. Make it see no witchy wa. Make witch you get cheated. Oh, get cheated. Oh, get cheated. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Big wish and all goodness. Sooner good day you get cheated. Make it see no witchy wa. Big witch you get cheated. Oh, get cheated. Oh, get cheated. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, Yahweh, ha. Yahweh, Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Yahweh, ho. Big witch and all goodness. Sooner good day you get cheated. Make it see no witchy wa. Make witch you get cheated. Oh, get cheated. Oh, get cheated. Oh, get cheated. Oh. So again, Miigwech to the university and everyone involved in planning and organizing this special event to honor our Indigenous veterans. We need to remember them. We need to remember all veterans for what they did for us. And this November 11th, as I said in the beginning of my opening, I said that there is usually Veterans Day memoriams happening in a few areas of the city. If you've never been up to Anemki-Waju for one of our ceremonies there, I invite you to come up to our sacred mountain and participate in one up there. I know it's sometimes very cold on Anemki-Waju on Veterans Day, but not always. But even if it is, that's okay. Dress for it. Put on those, bundle up, because for a half an hour or an hour of suffering, the veterans suffered way more than that. So I think you could suffer a little bit to come up to Anemki-Waju to honor the First Nation veterans at that particular Veterans Day, Memorial Day. And you know what else? Fort William First Nation offers a beautiful lunch in their community hall after the ceremony. So I don't think you get that at the other the other sites. So but to come to Fort William, you're going to get honored with a a beautiful traditional meal. And yeah, so I invite you to come up there, experience it at least once. And just bundle up. That's what I want to leave with you. Come up to an Waju and bundle up, and that little bit of suffering is nothing compared to what our veterans suffered. So I just want to leave that with you. Oh, miigwech, miigwech, miigwech.
But you may have a seat. Chimigwich Elder Sheila, and thank you to everybody for joining us today. A special thank you to the Native Veterans Association of Northwestern Ontario, Treaty 3 Indigenous Veterans Exhibit, Thunder Bay Museum, Thunder Bay, City of Thunder Bay, and Jen for certainly coming and sharing your story with us. And for the others who came to listen, we really appreciate that. We will have the display on the exhibit on display until Friday afternoon. Stacy's going to hit play, and the virtual exhibit that Anna put together, you'll get to see people, where they're from, a little bit, maybe quotes here and there of when available. And we will be putting couches in front of here later so that you can come back and you can actually sit and watch and have some reflection time. So if you haven't already had a chance to walk through, we invite you to. We also have coffee, tea, and some bannock that Sheila got us at the back. So a little bit of food. Oh, our other Sheila. That's right. So again, thank you. As we walk together, I wish you peace and harmony. Miigwech, thank you.